Most people think love is loud, but what if love is quiet, hesitant, even distant? We expect connection to look a certain way, constant texts, long talks, endless closeness. But not everyone loves like that. Some people love from a distance, not because they don't care, but because they care too much. They pull away, not to leave, but to feel safe. They need space to breathe, not because you're too much, but because they're afraid of being consumed. You won't always hear "I love you," but you might see them fix your door or remember your favorite song. Love from an avoidant doesn't come in a straight line. But if they're still standing beside you, they're loving you the only way they know how. Love doesn't always look like closeness. That's a truth many of us struggle to accept, especially when we're taught that real love means constant communication, physical affection, and emotional openness. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, love operates differently. It's not that they don't feel deeply, they do. In fact, they often feel so deeply that it overwhelms them. And rather than move closer, their instinct is to retreat, to step back, to create space. And that space, to them, feels like safety. When an avoidant person loves you, you might not see the affection in the ways you expect. You may not get long, vulnerable conversations late at night. You might not receive daily reminders of how much you mean to them. But look closer. You'll notice something just as powerful. They're still there. They haven't run. That alone is an act of courage for someone who fears emotional dependency. Choosing to stay, even when it feels uncomfortable, is their way of saying, "I care about you." Avoidant people often grow up in environments where vulnerability wasn't safe. Maybe they were taught to rely only on themselves. Maybe their emotional needs weren't met, so they learned to minimize those needs entirely. So when love enters the picture, when you show them warmth and intimacy, their nervous system doesn't recognize it as comfort. It recognizes it as danger. And they do what they've always done to survive. They distance themselves. But make no mistake, if they're trying to stay close at all, that's a battle they're fighting every day. It's easy to misread their behavior. You may think they're disinterested, that they don't value you. But often the opposite is true. The more they care, the more fear they feel. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because closeness challenges everything they've learned to protect themselves from. So when they don't call back right away, when they seem cold or withdrawn after a tender moment, don't jump to conclusions. That might be the moment they're trying the hardest not to run. Someone who is avoidant takes patience, empathy, and a willingness to see beyond surface behaviors. It's not about lowering your standards or settling for less. It's about recognizing that love isn't one size fits all. And when an avoidant chooses to love you, they are going against their own instincts. They are showing you a love that costs them comfort. A love that stretches them beyond their default settings. That love might not always be loud. It might not always be expressive in the ways you're used to. But it is real and it is brave. So if you ever feel unsure, if you ever question whether they truly care, ask yourself this: are they still showing up? Are they trying, even in small ways? Because for someone who fears closeness, every act of staying is an act of love. And that kind of love, though quiet, is powerful beyond words. They show up in quiet, practical ways. That's the truth about someone with an avoidant attachment style, when they love you. Their love doesn't come wrapped in poetry or dramatic declarations. It doesn't flood your phone with sweet messages or surprise you with romantic gestures every week. But it's there, and if you look closely, you'll see it in the smallest, most ordinary moments, the ones most people would overlook. Avoidant people often struggle with emotional expression. Vulnerability makes them feel exposed, even unsafe. So they lean into what they can control. They express love through action, not words. They fix things. They bring you coffee on a busy morning. They fill up your gas tank without saying a word. They research solutions when you mention a problem in passing. To them, doing something useful is a form of connection. It's how they say, "I see you, I care, I want to make your life easier." That might not seem romantic in the traditional sense, but to them, it's the most honest and reliable way to love. These quiet gestures are not random. They're deeply intentional. They might not initiate deep emotional conversations, but they'll remember what time your interview is and wish you good luck in their own quiet way. They may not hold your hand in public, but they'll walk on the street side of the sidewalk to keep you safe. These are not accidents. These are chosen acts of love, measured, often understated, but deeply meaningful. In fact, the more they care, the more practical they often become. Emotionally overwhelming situations make them shut down or pull away. But concrete needs, tasks they can complete, that's where they thrive. Helping you solve something, fixing a broken chair, offering advice, or silently supporting you when you're sick. These are the moments when their love becomes visible. And while it may not feel emotionally warm on the surface, it's rooted in a strong sense of loyalty and devotion. For many avoidants, saying, "I love you," or opening up emotionally is a mountain they aren't ready to climb just yet. But they climb smaller hills every day by staying connected through usefulness. They don't ghost you when things get tough. Instead, they find ways to show up that feel safe to them. And slowly, their actions become a bridge, one they hope you'll walk across with understanding and patience, rather than demand they jump into emotional waters they're still learning to swim in. This is why it's so important not to measure love only by how emotionally expressive someone is. Love languages are different. For avoidants, acts of service aren't just a preference. They're a survival strategy that has become their comfort zone. When they choose to serve, they're letting you into a part of their world that feels manageable. It's the way they can give without feeling overwhelmed. And often, it's the only way they know how to give at all. Over time, if they feel emotionally safe, they may start to soften. You might notice their gestures becoming a bit more personal, their efforts more attuned to your emotional world. But even if they never become the open book you wished for, their quiet devotion is still something sacred. Not everyone will scream their love from rooftops. Some will just be there, carrying your groceries, fixing your leaky faucet, making sure your favorite mug is clean. That's their version of "I love you." So if you're loved by an avoidant, pay attention to the things they do without being asked, the routines they build around you, the small responsibilities they take off your plate. That's their love. Not flashy, not loud, but consistent, steady, real. They struggle with vulnerability, but they're trying. That simple truth holds an ocean of complexity, especially when you're in a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. These individuals often appear emotionally distant, self-contained, even cold at times. But underneath the surface is a person who wants to connect, who wants to love deeply, and who is quietly fighting an internal battle between fear and desire. For an avoidant, vulnerability feels like exposure. It's not just about sharing feelings. It's about risking pain, rejection, and the loss of control. Growing up, they may have learned that showing emotion led to disappointment or disconnection. They might have been taught, directly or indirectly, that relying on others is dangerous. So they built walls, not because they don't want love, but because love once came with consequences they weren't equipped to handle. But here's what often goes unseen. When they care about someone, they start to push against those walls, not in dramatic, sweeping ways, but in small, cautious steps. They might not pour out their heart, but they'll share a story they've never told anyone else. They might not say, "I'm scared," but they'll show it in the way they hesitate before opening up, or in the way they retreat and then come back. Every inch of closeness takes immense courage for them. What feels natural to others, emotional openness, physical intimacy, depending on someone, is a steep uphill climb for the avoidant. And yet, they try. They try because something in you feels safe. Something in you feels worth the risk. They notice your consistency, your patience, your non-judgmental presence, and it softens them. It doesn't change them overnight, but it makes them willing to experiment with a different way of being. They start to test the waters. They might tell you about a bad day or admit when they're hurt. These moments are significant. They may seem minor on the surface, but they're breakthroughs for someone who has spent most of their life believing it's safer to go it alone. You may find yourself frustrated sometimes, wishing they would just say what they feel, just let you in. That's valid. But remember, every time they try to be vulnerable, they're challenging years, sometimes decades, of wiring. It's not that they don't want to let you in, it's that they don't yet know how to, without feeling like they're losing something essential, like their independence or their sense of control. This is why your response to their vulnerability matters so much. If you meet it with criticism, pressure, or emotional overreaction, they're likely to shut down again. But if you meet it with calm, empathy, and space, you give them the safety they've always needed but never had. You teach them through your actions that vulnerability doesn't have to hurt, and that love doesn't have to mean self-abandonment. Their efforts might never look like the emotional fluency of someone with a secure attachment, but their progress is real. They're learning slowly that they can be close to someone and still be themselves. They're learning that love doesn't have to consume or control them. And most importantly, they're learning that it's okay to need someone else. Because being vulnerable doesn't mean being weak. It means being brave. So if you're loved by someone who struggles with vulnerability, don't look only for grand emotional gestures. Look for the courage in their eyes when they share a small truth. Look for the effort behind their silence, and when they try even a little, acknowledge it, because for them, that try is everything. Independence is not distance, it's safety. That idea can feel counterintuitive in a relationship, especially when we're conditioned to believe that true love means closeness, constant connection, and emotional availability. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, independence isn't about pushing you away. It's about keeping themselves grounded. It's not an escape from the relationship. It's a way to stay regulated within it. To the avoidant, personal space isn't a threat to intimacy, it's a requirement for it. It's how they maintain a sense of self. They don't pull back because they don't love you. They pull back because that's how they protect the parts of themselves that feel easily overwhelmed in emotional environments. It's about restoring balance in their internal world. For them, too much closeness too quickly can feel suffocating. Their nervous system reads it as a loss of control, and when that happens, they retreat. Not out of cruelty or lack of interest, but out of instinct. This can be confusing for their partners. You might think, if they love me, why do they keep pulling away? But the real question is, how do they stay in a relationship at all, given how much emotional exposure challenges them? The answer is by preserving their independence. It's how they feel safe. It's how they make sense of their emotions. When they can return to themselves, to their space, their routines, their solitude, they come back stronger, calmer, and more able to connect. Many people misunderstand this behavior and interpret it as rejection. But love doesn't look the same for everyone. For avoidance, love is often quieter, more internal, and more cautious. It's rooted in consistency, not intensity. Their independence isn't the opposite of love. It's the environment in which their love survives. When they feel safe to be themselves, when they know they won't be swallowed up by the relationship, they are more willing to show up, stay engaged, and keep building something real. You might notice they need alone time after an emotionally charged conversation, or they may seem to disengage after moments of closeness. This isn't emotional manipulation, it's a defense mechanism. It's how they decompress, how they make sense of vulnerability. But here's what matters. They return, they come back, and over time, they begin to trust that closeness won't cost them their identity, that they can love you without losing themselves. This is why patience is so important. Pressuring an avoidant to open up before they're ready, or misinterpreting their need for space as disinterest, can push them further away. Instead, honor their need for independence as part of who they are. Support it, not as a barrier to intimacy, but as a bridge to deeper, more sustainable love. When they feel safe enough to be separate, they also feel safe enough to connect. The goal in a relationship with an avoidant isn't to eliminate their independence. It's to create a dynamic where both closeness and space can coexist, where emotional intimacy doesn't feel like entrapment and autonomy doesn't feel like abandonment. That's where real connection happens, not in forcing constant closeness, but in respecting each other's rhythms. So the next time they ask for space or seem to step back, remember, it might not be about pushing you away, it might be about finding the courage to stay. And that space, they're not using it to escape you. They're using it to come back to you whole. Because for them, love without independence isn't safety, and without safety, they can't love at all. It's the fear of disappearing, of being consumed, of no longer recognizing who they are outside of us. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, love isn't just about sharing a life, it feels like giving up parts of their identity. And that's terrifying, because at their core, they've learned that depending on someone else, or being deeply emotionally entangled, means risking their stability. They've built entire lives on self-reliance. Their emotional survival is often rooted in autonomy. So when they fall in love, they find themselves torn. Part of them wants to lean in, to connect, to trust, but the other part is scanning for signs that the relationship will ask too much, take too much, and leave them without the independence they've worked so hard to protect. This fear doesn't mean they don't value the relationship. It means they're constantly trying to strike a delicate balance between closeness and self-preservation. When things start to get more serious, when emotional demands grow, or when you ask them to open up more, they may react by withdrawing. Not because they're done, not because they've stopped loving you, but because they're trying to figure out how to love without losing themselves in the process. So, if you're asking yourself the question, this internal tension can show up in many ways. They might resist labels, avoid future planning, or seem hesitant about merging lives too quickly. They might downplay emotional conversations or change the subject when vulnerability arises. These aren't signs of apathy, they're signs of struggle. Because in their mind, every inch they give emotionally feels like a piece of their independence being handed over. And that loss, even if only perceived, can feel unbearable. It's important to recognize that this fear often stems from early experiences, relationships where their needs were overlooked, or where love came with expectations they couldn't meet. So now, as adults, they have learned to protect themselves by keeping parts of their emotional world off limits. Love starts to feel like a tug of war between intimacy and individuality. And even when they love you deeply, they may hold back, not because they don't want to move forward, but because they don't know how to do it without compromising who they are. But here's the hopeful part. If they're still showing up, still trying, still engaging in the relationship despite this fear, it means something profound. It means you matter. It means they're fighting an internal battle every day to stay present with you. They're trying to rewrite the story that says closeness equals loss. And with the right kind of support, patience, empathy, and understanding, they can slowly start to believe that love doesn't have to erase them, that it can be a place of freedom, not confinement. This is where your role becomes powerful. You can help them see that being part of a relationship doesn't mean giving up their independence. It means expanding it. That love can be a place where two people stand side by side, not on top of each other. Where being close doesn't mean being trapped. And where real connection comes from mutual respect for each other's individuality. So when they pull back, when they need space, or when they seem unsure, don't take it personally. Take it as a sign that they're working through something much deeper. Because if they truly didn't care, there wouldn't be any fear at all. Fear only exists where love lives. And if they're still there, still trying, it means they haven't lost themselves yet. They're just afraid they might. If they stay, they care. It might not always look like it. With someone who has an avoidant attachment style, their presence can feel confusing, even contradictory. They may seem emotionally distant, guarded, or slow to commit. They might shy away from deep conversations or moments of vulnerability. But the very fact that they're still there, still choosing to remain connected in their own way, is one of the most powerful signs that they care more deeply than their behavior suggests. Avoidant individuals are wired to protect themselves from emotional overwhelm. They've often learned, sometimes early in life, that relationships can be unpredictable, even unsafe. They've developed internal systems that prioritize self-reliance, distance, and control. Love, for them, brings risk. The risk of being exposed, of needing someone, of feeling out of control. So when they feel love, they don't run toward it like some do. They hesitate. They assess, they measure, they ask themselves, can I handle this without losing who I am? That's why their staying power matters so much. Staying in a relationship when you're avoidant is an act of resistance against fear, against old narratives, against habits that say it's safer to leave than to be seen. When they stay, they are actively choosing discomfort over disappearance. They're challenging their own patterns, slowly and imperfectly, to be part of something they hope is safe enough to grow in. That choice may be subtle. You might not see grand gestures or open emotional confessions, but you will see consistency. You'll see them come back after pulling away. You'll notice them making room for you in their routine, even if it's not verbalized. That's love in action, the avoidant way. It can be easy to misread their quiet presence. You might think if they cared, wouldn't they talk more, share more, show more? But avoidants aren't wired for emotional transparency. They don't always express love in obvious ways. Instead, their love shows up in small, steady acts. Helping you solve a problem, remembering the details you mention offhand, doing things for you without being asked. These actions are meaningful, even if they're quiet. If they didn't care, they wouldn't bother. Leaving is easy for avoidants. It's their default response to discomfort. So when they stay, especially when things get emotionally messy or intense, it's because they see something in you that's worth the internal struggle. That doesn't mean they won't pull back or need space, but it does mean they're invested enough to work through their own discomfort, even if it's not always smooth. They might not say it, but by staying, they are learning how to love in a way that doesn't betray themselves. They're also watching you, not in a critical way, but in a cautious one. They're looking for consistency, safety, patience. They want to know, can I be close to you without being consumed? Can I open up without being judged or overwhelmed? Can I stay and still be me? Your reactions matter. When you meet their fear with reassurance, not pressure, they feel a little safer. And when they feel safe, they begin to open, little by little. That's the quiet miracle of loving someone avoidant. Progress doesn't come in waves, it comes in inches. But those inches matter. Every time they choose to stay instead of retreating, every time they let you into their world just a little more, they're saying, I care. They might not say it out loud, they might never say it in the way you expect, but their presence, through discomfort, through fear, through silence, is a testament to how much you mean to them, because if they stay, they care. And for someone who's spent a lifetime running, staying is the most vulnerable thing they can do